Sorry, it's loading. Okay, so let's see. And because I can't see all of you, you'll actually have to speak up for me. Ken Whitco.
Present.
Okay, James Hairston. I see you.
Present.
Mark Pila.
Present.
Alan Hart.
Here.
Ray Dotson.
Here.
Todd Wolf. Karen said that she might need to join on YouTube online on Zoom. So I think I don't see her yet, but I think she's coming. Teresa also said she's running a little behind, but she'll join on Zoom. Martin Pullman. Here. Camry Wilson. Here. And then I have Councilmember Mike Brandstetter.
Here.
Our Assistant Chief John Unford is back.
Here.
And Assistant Fire Chief Scott Adams.
Here.
And do we have anybody in there from Youth Council?
I don't see anyone.
Okay.
No.
I'll have to check in because that's a couple meetings that they haven't been able to attend. I think that's everybody.
Thank you. So everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Move the minutes be accepted as presented.
Seconded. Minutes are approved. Did you check it? Did you do vote on it? I'm sorry. I'm still new at this. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, now they're approved. Do we have any public comments? Looks like Todd's joining us.
And
Yes, I got in.
Sorry.
I
have nothing for the no public comments were sent to me.
Okay. We have a guest speaker tonight, CEO Mark Thompson and Rob Blumenthal from Western State Hospital. Welcome. Thank you. You had some any comments tonight?
We're just glad to be here and to answer any questions that you might have about new hospital construction. So yes, Mark Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of the Gage Center at Western State. So I supervise all the forensic wards at the hospital, and with me is Bob Blumenthal.
I'm the staff architect for DSHS, the director of our Office of Capital Programs, responsible for design and construction at our institutions.
Did you have a presentation or more?
It was really more availability for any comments or concerns you have. I know there's been a lot of hubbub over the last couple of years as we were in the design phase of the construction of the new hospital, a lot of concerns about what buildings are coming down, what buildings are going up. So I think Chief Zara reached out just to see if we could be available for any kinds of concerns or issues that have come up. Bob is really the master when it comes to the design process of what things will look like and the impacts to other city infrastructure around the hospital. And I'm here, to obviously answer any kind of operational questions on the hospital or its services or capacity and those things.
So I do have some printed materials. I printed until I ran out of paper. And so if we can share. These are our schematic design plans for the new hospital. Schematic design is about the first third where we identify what spaces and the relationships and the sciences as we get into the project. And so what you see on the cover is a preliminary representation of what the new hospital might look like. It's a 4-story structure in the main building, which includes the inpatient wards, admissions, administration, and most of the treatment areas. And then there is a separate 3-story administration annex that includes training functions, our IT department, our HR, and other administrative folks that don't need to be in the secure hospital, but need to be adjacent and supporting that. I think the second page shows that same plan on the campus. We are wedged between building 29, which fits in the southwest corner of the campus. And if you're familiar with the campus, there's a quadrangle fence around the big 3-4-story buildings that you might be familiar with. And that just kind of lays out the somewhat serpentine nature of the wards and the treatment spaces. The next sketch shows the 5 different levels, basement to 4th floor, and I know it's hard to read and figure out. You might recognize sleeping rooms, but the lowest level, well, we got some basement access so that we get back and forth between elevators for things like food carts and laundry. The first level there on the right-hand side, the pink space are admissions and clinical spaces. The dark blue is administrative services. The light blue is our one-of-a-kind treatment centers. These are for things like the gymnasium, the physical and occupational therapy, the chapel are located there on the ground floor, accessible to all patients. Starting at the bottom of the left-hand column, you go up a phase, and all of the green units are these Y-shaped inpatient units or wards. And so 25 single bedrooms with bathrooms, the nurses stations, associated services for medication distribution, laundry, collection and distribution. The yellow and orange spaces we call the neighborhood. These are where patients receive treatment. And so in concept, they live in the green spaces, they cross that purple bridge for breakfast and their treatment activities throughout the day, and then they come back in the evening to the residential spaces. So very much an off-the-wall treatment model. The space that is in between those purple bars are interior courtyards. And these are opportunities for patients to have recreation, some social interaction, some connection with nature. Some of those courtyards are more actively designed, like with the basketball court. Others are more quiet and contemplative. As we move up to the 3rd and 4th floors, primarily all inpatient wards and the treatment areas. The Y shape is connected in kind of an odd way with the stem of the Y connecting to one of the branches of the Y, so it's continuous throughout. So if we have the need to evacuate one ward, they move horizontally across the building through fire separations rather than up and down the building. Questions so far? I guess this next sketch is a blow up of the clinical area. There are 3 entrances to the new facility. There's kind of a knuckle in the bottom there, cornered off. That's where the main public entry is for staff coming in, for visitors coming in, and maybe our administrative staff. There's an access for staff coming in one of those red wings, and then a separate sally port for patients coming from the jails for admission into the hospital.
Did you skip one page?
No.
Looks like an overall site plan.
Yep, I did. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. So the red line is the extent of our activity on campus. All of those dashed in lines are buildings to be demolished. So there's about a dozen of them. They include South Hall in that bottom right-hand corner, which is one of our 4, 5, 6-story ward buildings now from the late 30s, early 40s. Other buildings along Steilacoom Boulevard, with the exception of building 27, which you can see there is protected. And a couple of other supporting buildings, the old gymnasium, the greenhouse, the old commissary, the old pharmacy, those come down as well. And then the rest of the campus gets treated with landscaping and additional parking, which we'll show on the sketch in the future sketch. Just a little bit of a blow up. The gray space is our facility services. So this is where our mechanical plants are. Maintenance has a presence here. This is where our loading dock, our laundry, our food carts come in and out through that point of the hospital. and then the other 3 primary entrances for visitors, for staff, and for admissions. And just go through the next couple of floors up if you want to look a little bit more closely at the arrangement of spaces. Because of the schematic, we've had subsequent conversations with staff over the last 4 weeks, and so this has changed a little bit. The folks get a first sense of looking at things and saying, "Oh, I wish that was a little bit bigger," or "I wish that was next to that." So things will jumble around just a bit, but the spaces that are planned for the hospital remain the same. There's a large plan of the Y-shaped inpatient unit, and that shows the arrangement of the 3 sleeping pods around the nurse station. We've broken this 25-bed ward down into 8 and 8 and 9-bed units to reduce the size, with the wide corridors and the other spaces to give patients some space, so that they can choose to interact or they can choose to not. The next is simply one of the bullets of that neighborhood where the orange space are the staff resource and the office space, and the yellow are the classrooms, the activity rooms, the other kinds of interview rooms that are included. And on this sketch, you see a sky bridge headed off to the upper right and the upper left. Those connect back to the individual inpatient units. And the next page is just several indications of preliminarily what it might look like. Top right, the picture from the cover. The bottom left is a view driving west on Silicon Boulevard. If you turn into the hospital, this is kind of the entry that you see there on the middle right. The bottom left is a view from one of those interior courtyards that shows the inpatient units to the left and the treatment malls to the right. And then lastly, the bottom right view is another view from Silicon Boulevard, kind of looking back to the northeast. And is that the end of what you've got? I think so. So we are proceeding through design. We expect, I mean, this is an expensive project. We've requested $895 million in the capital budget. It is supported in the governor's budget. We're working with the legislature to help them understand the project so that they will fund it. Once we are sure that we have funding after the end of session, mid-April or thereabouts, we will begin abatement and demolition of some of the existing buildings, up and down in 3 phases. In the meantime, we've got a little bit of remodeling work to do inside the existing buildings to get ready space where folks that are working in buildings to be demolished have some place to go. And so a little bit of remodeling. We've got one ward in one of the older buildings that we're bringing back into service so that we can move our last ward of patients out of building 21, South Hall. And to accomplish this, we also need to move our quadrangle fence. That's the main fence that encloses the central part of the campus. And so we're moving that to the east before we start any of the other demolition. We need to move it because a couple of buildings that make part of that perimeter, the South Hall and the pharmacy, are scheduled to be demolished. So if we move the fence, then we can take down the old fence and demolish the other buildings. We would expect that we'll have demolition complete. Construction can start in early 2024 for completion in late calendar year 2027.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I toured the site with the former CEO. I forget his name now. Dave, yes, probably 4 years ago. And at that time, there was capital or big building project going on and some other redesign and stuff. I don't remember what that was. Was that ever done, or that's forget about it, or what?
So if it was underway, it got done. There was Well, primarily, we were building a new kitchen, commissary, pharmacy, central supply, kind of on the north edge of campus. That's been completed and been occupied for about a year. In that same time frame, we were doing some ward renovations to upgrade and secure a number of other wards and 10 wards across campus, altogether maybe 12 with E3, E4. And so that ward renovation work is complete. We are just now completing a 2-ward addition to building 28, which is on the north side and the northeast side of campus. That is all but done, waiting for our final inspections. And once we have those, we'll begin occupying those 2 wards with patients. And then we just opened bids and are preparing to award a contract for additional treatment and recovery center work in building 28, which is next to building 20, in building 29, which is next to 28, which will serve half the population that remains in the existing East Campus students.
Okay, there was a process that the wards were being redesigned to help alleviate injury to staff as well as patients.
So the newer wards are all single occupancy. The existing wards that we remodeled, we reduced that census from 30 to 25 so that we could have all single rooms. We were confined a little bit by the perimeter of the existing building and the number of existing windows that we have. But it's that. And then in those wards and in other wards across the hospital, we've installed security panels at the nurses' station so that you can't hop the desk from the patient side into the staff.
Is there a change in the design, or is it just sort of reinforcing what's there?
The desktops and stations remain the same. What we've added are glass panels that extend from that countertop to the ceiling.
And I don't expect that you'll have the number of this, but I'm kind of curious, what would the graph look like pre-redesign in terms of injuries and now? Was it beneficial? Did it help?
We have seen a reduction in overall assaults at the hospital over the last 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, there are still definitely instances of violence. We have very difficult patients to deal with, especially those coming in on the forensic side who are coming to the jail, sometimes unmedicated. So we do still have assaults, so I'm not taking away from that, but the overall trend has declined.
What about walkaways?
Usually walkaways.
People who decide they don't want to be in the hospital anymore or
Sure, I'll call them escapes. Yeah, we also have seen a drastic reduction in that number. And I think on my side of the hospital, on the forensic wards, I think it was approximately 1.5 years ago, the last time that we had any incident. I think there was one incident that involved a patient that was on an appointment under escort and the patient took off. We had assistance from Lakewood PD in that incident, but it's been quite some time.
And I have another, sorry, go ahead. Okay, just I've heard a rumor, and maybe it's true, that I can be corrected, that governor is actually going to close Fox Island. Close Fox Island. We don't want it anymore. McNeil Island, and release all of the sex offenders into their counties and homes and whatever. Is that going to? So he's saying no, that's not going to happen. But is it going to happen? And will it affect you guys at all?
So you want to talk about the effects first?
Well, I can say the two are different. So Western State Hospital's operations, it's a different population of offenders under a different statute that are detained and treated at Western State Hospital than it is at the Special Commitment Center on McNeil Island. So the rumor that I had heard about 1.5 years or 2 years ago was that we were emptying the Special Commitment Center and putting them in the new hospital. That is not true. Now, I do know that there are plans on Special Commitment Center to try to discharge patients to less restrictive environments when it's clinically appropriate. So there is work underway in the community to try to establish sites. I'm not deep in Special Commitment Center's business, but if there's any capital projects, you would help me.
Yeah, I remember there was a point maybe 6 or 8 years ago that the census was up over 300. Today, it's closer to 160 something. That's because the federal courts have determined that the individuals that are receiving treatment at the Special Commitment Center need to have the opportunity to progress in their treatment and work towards release to a less restrictive alternative. And so those that participate in treatment, that make progress, that are deemed by a review of any number of medical professionals and the courts, can be released from the SCEC to either a secure community transition facility, which is operated by the state, or a less restrictive alternative, which is typically operated by a vendor. It's maybe a 4 or 5 bed group home type of situation. Some of the individuals are released to families or friends or other kinds of living environments more independently. And a few pass away in care. So there will likely always be some that either don't participate in treatment or don't get the court order that allows them to transfer to the less restricted location.
So building 27, that's the old building. That is going to be torn down once the new construction is complete, or is it going to be remodeled?
We're going to leave it as is for now. The west half of that building is occupied by the Fort Steilacoom Competency Restoration Program. So it's a program that is separate from the hospital, but it is treating within that continuum of care. The right side of that building is our habilitated mental health. And these are patients that have both a mental illness, but also a developmental disability. And so those 60 patients will remain in 27 throughout the construction of the new hospital. At some point in the future, consistent with the Governor of Behavioral Health plans to locate or to focus the hospitals on forensic patients and address civil care in the community, we hope to be able to construct a new facility, probably in the shoreline area at one of our existing campuses, for those H&H individuals at one of our other developmental disability facilities.
I recall that a few years ago that the idea with the revamping was to reduce the amount of maybe, I think, forensic as well as civil, reduce the amount of patient. But is that still a thing, or is it going to be the same or more? Of what? How does that work?
It's a little of both. So it was a legislatively mandated directive that we close 6 additional civil wards at the hospital. So we have completed 5 of those closures, and there's 1 ward left to be closed. So the civil commitment footprint at the hospital has reduced. When that ward is closed, we will have 287 civil beds on the campus. The forensic capacity is the one that is increased. So we've had our number of beds at the hospital. We're adding 58 with F9 and F10 coming online. The new hospital will also be forensic competency restoration beds. So it's really in line with the governor's vision of making the state hospital those centers of forensic excellence. So increasing the ability to do competency restoration on Western State Hospital's grounds, building those smaller facilities in the community to serve civilly committed patients so they can be closer to their families' support systems.
And what is the bed for the forensic side?
Currently, we have 428 at the hospital, so we'll be gaining 58 with the opening of that time at 10, and then the 350 bed new hospital by 20.
Thank you. Is that the total, the expected population completion?
So the expected population is a number that I think we're going to have to continue to have conversations over the next. We have a number that is in the master plan that the city agreed to. And I think what we're really seeing right now is a lot of operational constraints. We need more beds. Even with the capacity that we're building for the 350 new forensic beds, we have a recognition right now with our capacity that we are having to turn away admissions because we don't have enough beds to serve the need in the community. So I think it's going to be an interactive conversation because we had a plan to continue to decrease that civil footprint on campus so that when the 350 bed new hospital came into existence, we can continue to close wards in the older parts of campus. I think it's, logic would dictate that we need to think about what we want to do in that regard, because even as we close those 6 civil wards on campus, it has exacerbated our bed shortage issue. We knew that it would. Obviously, when you close 6 wards worth of patients, you're going to have a smaller footprint into which to admit. But we've really been feeling those effects, and I think the communities, the counties are really feeling it as well when we can't get enough patients into the hospital.
So, you said you have 400 existing forensic beds
At Western State, correct?
and you're going to add 350?
That's correct.
So you'll have a total of 750 forensic beds.
Correct. And part of this is there is a bed needs forecast group in the state that is projecting our growth in forensic need and civil need. And I believe by 2027, you may have been in these conversations as well, Bob, but I think by 2027, 2028, we're projecting we will need 850 forensic beds on this side of the mountains by that time. So even with this 350 bed new hospital, we're still going to need to continue to find capacity where we can, which I know is really going to be the work of the next 4 or 5 years, is to figure out what we can do with existing capacity to help find additional beds for patients who need them, and potentially to site new locations.
So how many beds in this are going to be termed as long-term for those chronic people that will probably never be transition back into society?
So there's a few different answers to that. So the primary purpose of the new hospital, and for the majority of my beds, are competency restoration beds. Those are by nature short-term beds. We get those individuals in from jail who have a competency evaluation, and there's a determination they could be rehabilitated, restored to competency to go back and stand trial for their charges. So those patients, 90 days, sometimes a second 90 days, as they're determined whether they can be restored to competency. Also on the forensic wards, I have not guilty by reason of insanity patients, and those patients are those long-term forensic patients. So if they are not guilty by reason of insanity of a serious felony, they could be with me for the duration of what their sentence would have been in a prison institution. And so I have patients with me for 20, 25 years. We try to get those patients moved through the privileging system so that they could get conditionally released with a court order into the community in a less restrictive environment when possible. And then there's also the civil patients at the hospital who probably are more of the long-term patients that you're referring to, those individuals who are not as responsive to treatment. They'll have a 180-day commitment, and they have not been able to restore their ability to care for themselves. They get another 180-day commitment. We do have several individuals like that at the hospital, less than we used to, but I think even in the governor's vision, there was the acknowledgement that's why we will still need some civil beds at Western State Hospital, because we can't just rely on the community to treat the most psychiatrically compromised individuals who are civil.
Is there any talk about doing something on the east side and maybe restoring Eastern Hospital? And
there have been conversations. I know Eastern State has renovated wards to get them up to where they could maximize their capacity. I don't know that we have any conversations currently about.
There's nothing in our long-term plan to increase the capacity of Eastern. It is operating pretty much at capacity. I think there's one empty ward today, and we appreciate that. We're doing some work in the hospital that we don't want to do in an occupied ward. So shuttle patients are removed so that we can do renovation work. But there's nothing in our 10-year capital plan to expand Eastern State Hospital.
I think Todd has a question.
Todd, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah. I thought maybe you're going to read it. Yeah, my question is, is there any updating regarding restoring the federal certification of the hospital and the funds that come with it, and these improvements address that?
So there's two answers to that as well. 250-bed new hospital design is intentionally being designed to meet current certification standards. So that is the plan, that when that hospital opens, that it will be fully certified by CMS so that we can capture some of those reimbursement dollars. For the existing parts of the campus, there are certain buildings in which we do not feel there's a likelihood we will ever be able to get certified again. Now that we have lost certification, we would have to apply under current codes and standards for a lot of the life safety issues. And so for some of the older wards, like South Hall that's being torn down, you have sprinkler heads that are not ligature compliant. You have some HVAC components where you can't get in to access whether the damper is open and closed. It sounds like a very simple thing, but it would require additional capital dollars from Bob's folks to go through and do these repairs. What we are doing is looking at buildings 28 and 29 in the back of the campus where we're adding those additional 2 wards right now to do potentially more architectural design review work to see if we can get that building, that structure up to code so that we could be compliant with life safety codes in order to apply for certification. So the long range hope would be that the new hospital, 350 beds, we could get certified and that we could do existing renovation work to buildings 28 and 29 and also get that certified. But my guess is they may hit around the same time.
Building 28 was constructed in 1980, building 29 in 2000. Got that backwards. But they're both relatively new compared to the 1938, 1944 construction of the large brick buildings that you see.
So I guess follow-up, is that certification still something like 2 years out then if all of that's on schedule?
A little 2 years.
And does that mean the percentage of the whatever it was, 50 some $1 million would come in for the percentage of upgrade or all of it?
It's a complex mathematical, but ultimately I believe that's accurate. I don't believe we would get the full $53 million because that was for, I believe it was 857 beds at the time for which we received that. So it would be a smaller amount based on the total number of beds.
All right. Well, that answers an earlier question. Thank you.
I just was wondering, going through the new design that you got here, how does this design going to enhance your security program at the hospital, or conversely, are there things that it's going to exasperate?
Well, I can start and then I'll let you throw in the design schematics up. But I think the overall answer is it is going to improve security and it is going to improve treatment efficacy. So really what we tried to do was make sure that it was a secure environment. That's why all of the rooms are single rooms. We are enclosing all of the nurses stations in the new design, as we learned previously that we have to go back and do on existing wards. So we're taking a lot of those considerations into account. But additionally, whereas you have the large fences around the current Western State Hospital grounds, we really want to try to make a therapeutic environment with those sky bridges that you would have these contained courtyards, but they wouldn't be these gigantic fences. But that was an intentional part of the design process, was to have all of those areas contained within the building itself instead of an exterior fence, because as the community knows, there have been people who have scaled our fence on the existing Western State Hospital grounds. So that was a part of the design building.
Yeah, that was intentional, that most of those courtyards are interior, and so you'd have to scale up a 4-story building to get over that. There are a couple of courtyards that are fenced, but they'll have a similar kind of security fencing, the 14-foot non-climbable fence around the space that is off the gymnasium, and there is one courtyard that's not enclosed completely by a building that would have a similar kind of fence. And I think we've been reasonably successful in not having patients scale the 14-foot fences.
Right.
And by limiting the number of doors and access points and the interior sally ports and securities, there's just fewer opportunities to find another door to get out.
So is the overall design, while it's going to impact your staffing for medical folks, how do you envision it being your security staffing numbers increasing or decreasing, or?
I think the anticipation, and we always have to take awareness of operational reality, but I think the anticipation is that we'll be able to reduce our security force at the hospital, but increase our therapeutic interventions that we're providing to patients. Part of this is really a move at the hospital toward trauma-informed care, training our staff in techniques and methods and ways to interact with patients that can reduce stimulation, that can recognize triggers and things that may be going on in patients' minds. And so as we make that shift, really trying to push away from the correctional kind of mentality to one that is therapeutic and trauma-informed, that we will have less of a need for security staff, because really the security staff at Western State Hospital, they're the second line of defense. They are the ones who come in when things have not gone well. So part of the effort is to prevent things from not going poorly in the first place.
Are you going to be able to man this after you get it built? Is there going to be enough?
That's $1 million question. I hope so. I can tell you that vacancies is probably one of my top 3 things that I talk about anywhere I go right now. I think we are reflective of the national crisis that we're experiencing in healthcare in general. But I would say average across every position type at the hospital, I'm probably about 30% vacancies total for all of my position types. For psychiatrists, it's approximately 45%. For psychologists, it's in the nature of 50%. So we are trying to learn to do more with less. So I try to remain guardedly optimistic about recruiting. I think the state is a great place to work, but I know that nationally we're having to figure out and try to do new and different things and keep up with the private sector for what they do.
And I hope as an architect that this will be a facility that people will want to work in. And that's yet another enticement to come to Western State Hospital from someplace else, maybe because you're working in a new state-of-the-art facility that is designed intentionally for therapy. Is the chiller plant going to be replaced or added on? No, good question. The existing steam plant will remain. It will continue to serve the other buildings on campus. This building will be what we hope to be zero net energy, which means that it will produce as much power, mostly from solar panels and perhaps geothermal wells or heat pumps, as it will consume in a year. So it will not be connected to the main steam plant, and it will not have a carbon footprint the way that the other buildings have. And I say hopeful. The solar panels are a $30 million investment for a project this size, and I'm hoping that the legislature will fully fund the project so that we can truly make it zero energy.
You kind of alluded to it earlier during the construction phase. But what is the plan for the current patients during the construction phases?
So currently, in the buildings that are being demolished, we have 3 wards worth of patients remaining in South Hall. That is the only patient-occupied building to be demolished. 2 of those wards will be coming into the Gage Center, into that building 28 and 29. We have 2 wards that are currently vacant but require some renovations. So we're engaged in those renovations now. Those 2 wards will come over. And then the other one is the one Bob was alluding to, where they're refinishing an existing ward on the civil side, and that final civil ward will be able to move into that renovated ward on the civil side. So there's space for all those patients. We don't have to relocate any patients specifically for the village.
Would you be able to handle an influx during that total construction phase, or what is it?
Well, you're going to be pretty full up.
Exactly.
So there's not going to be much room to squeeze in additional patients. And most of the patients are on the other side of campus. So the construction impacts, there will be some noise during daylight hours. And so some of the patients that are a couple hundred feet away may see activity out their windows or may hear some rumble as the project goes together. So we're hoping that by fencing in and separating the construction site from the rest of the hospital, you will see minimal disruptions to the hospital operations themselves that aren't scheduled water shut down to put a valve in real quick or something that pushes us on the generator to do something major.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, let me take just a moment to add.
Go ahead, and then Teresa, I think, has her hand up.
Okay. We've got the Child Study Treatment Center on our campus as well. We just completed a new facility there for 18 beds for our older youth. And in our 10-year master plan, we're scheduled to add another 18 beds to address the backlog of children waiting to get into our facilities for psychiatric services. So that kind of wraps up where we think we're headed for the next 2 years.
Teresa.
You're on mute. She didn't have a question.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, your hands up.
No. Is it? I don't think so.
Well, I'm just curious. The geothermal wells, you're up on that plateau, you're going to have to go quite a ways, or the aquifer doesn't come out to that area, does it?
We're drilling some wells and test wells in the next couple of weeks to see if we've got the water source. It's likely that some of our cost efficiencies will eliminate the ground source wells in favor of air-to-air transfer heat pumps. So the wells are have about twice the life cycle than the air-to-air heat pumps do. So I was hopeful that we could do that. But, we are very mindful of what that price tag is and can't let it creep over where we promised to go.
Put some limit on depth then, a couple hundred feet or
Oh, they can go down 400 feet and still be effective.
and still be effective.
Any more questions? Well, again, thank you.
I did. Very well. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Councilmember Branstad.
Well, again, I'm new here. Thanks. I've just got a few things I wanted to pass on. We are in the process of appointing a complement to get back to from 6 to 7. The timeline for that is that the applicants that will apply, we're going to do interviews of them, public interviews and council meetings on February 28th and March 1st. And we'll probably then be looking at March 6th at a council meeting, being the one of where the council will go through a process to select one of the folks that has applied. We have until March 28th to do it. That's the legal requirement for us to do it. So if we don't do it on March 6th, we probably do it on March 20th. The council has asked the legal department to draft 2 ordinances for us to consider. One has to do with making a city code misdemeanor for drug use in public, which is sort of the city's response to the fact that the state law sort of self-destructed and the legislature hasn't put it back together yet. So, and that we're anecdotally, we're seeing instances of where it's pretty open folks in public places that are using drugs, and that using this existing state law is not helpful. Probably the consideration of that by legal folks and by us as we're putting it together is going to be informed by does the legislature themselves do something during this session between now and May. But we are putting that that in play so that we can do something if it's needed or would be helpful. I haven't seen a draft of it, so I don't know exactly what it will say. We've more or less given the city attorney the intent and asked her to work and bring us something. Similarly, there is a consideration of an ordinance regarding camping on public property that we're looking and we're, this is primarily in response to the fact that there's an increase in folks experiencing homelessness that are setting up for residences, if you will, on various types of public property in the city. Some locations are impacted more than others. And we're just looking for a tool that can create a situation where we can get people to say, there's a place for you to go, you can get help, and you need to go there. And that if you won't, it could be go through a series of enforcement type citations to be able to go and do that. So the council has looked at that draft a couple of times and it's back to the city attorney to address some things because there have been some court decisions in Idaho and Oregon that impact the scope of what you can do and how you have to be able to back such ordinances up with the availability of shelter and services. But we expect to take some action on that this year. Okay, not being as with anything that moves at the speed of lawyers and so being able to go and do that. The road work on Washington Boulevard is progressing. It is a matter of concern to lots of folks in that area of the city and the folks that use that to come through. And part of that has to do with the detours keep changing. And they keep changing because the construction is phased. And within the phases, there are phases within the phase in terms of where is the water district working, where is public, our company is working, where we are, and so different roads get changed for different amounts of time. But generally, people are finding their way to where they want to go, and I'm not aware of there being, while it's taking more time, I'm not aware that the detours there are unsafe or that they haven't been allowed people to move through their safety. Probably the one location that I get emails about a lot where people say it's unsafe has to do with the intersection of 112 in View. And that has to do where it used to be a stop sign on 112 and now it's a three-way stop sign. And people who don't always realize that there's not a stop sign there. And so it creates some near mishaps for some folks. The other traffic safety public project that is going to get started here within the next couple of months is the combination project of Hipkins Road from 104th to Stelican Boulevard and Angle Lane from Hipkins Road and over to Elwood and down to Stelican Boulevard. Both of those are locations of where residents in those neighborhoods have felt vehicles go too fast, that the lack of sidewalks or the non-connected lengths of sidewalk are not safe for pedestrians and either road with amenities for cyclists. So looking to get started to do that, it will straighten out Hipkins to do away with all of those chicanes that people like to sail through. It is going to halfway down Hipkins, though, they're going to put a traffic circle, which is proven to be a effective traffic calming element in with our small stretch of straight roads, and learn that on to do that. And then over on the Elwood side, that they're going to put a traffic circle there at the entrance to Fort Stoughton Park. And right now there's that odd T with two roads that don't actually line up with each other to be able to go and do that. And then there will be a complete sidewalk, the entire length of Hipkins, the entire length of Angle Lane on one side. And then where Elwood runs along the park, there will be on the park side, but not immediately adjacent to the road, a paved multi-use path that will be good for pedestrians, suitable for ADA type non-motorized vehicles and bicycles, but to move along there with them to do that and the connection essentially between 104 and Jefferson Boulevard. So that's expected to be about it started this spring and take about 18 months. And while that is going on, they will be starting to build an upgraded baseball stadium just inside the entrance of the park on the very first ball field that is being built to the standards that for Pierce College to have as a home field to be able to go and do that. So that's going to be a good amenity that we do hold on to college, and I think we're doing it at the same time. Helps us getting Pierce College to fund some of the bills for the path circle.
Is there enough working there for baseball stadium?
Well, for a community college baseball stadium where they're trying to have capacity of about 450, 500 people. Everybody thinks yes.
Is there I'm sorry, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so isn't there already a ordinance or some sort of ordinance about camping on public property in the state or in the city? Isn't there something already?
No. What there is an ordinance that relates to parks and has parks being closed at certain times, and so it enforce being there, so that the parks are not places that folks can be going on. There are a number of places in the city where there are businesses, both public and private, where there are the city and the police department and mayor agents to deal with threat situations that. But there's not an actual ordinance that says you can't on public property in the city.
And what about camping on a sidewalk?
Well, a sidewalk is a piece of public property. But, this would extend the ability for that to be the case. It includes sidewalks, any places with rights of way, but it would include things like that on library property or on the water district's property or on school property. It would include things like, there are lots of spots of state-owned property and things that are there. And the last draft of the ordinance also included some private property. If the private property was adjacent to a lake or a stream, which tend to be some of the places that we see camping on undeveloped properties that are in private ownership, but that some people can set up temporary shelters and stay there. And those are particularly problematic because that kind of activity close to those streams might impact the water.
Does anyone have a chance to look at those and comment?
Oh, I'm sure that they will. Right now, we're still going back and forth with the city attorney, getting them in order to where the council is willing to look at them. I think that there is also a timeline of where, because the ordinance is going to say, and the rules about how you enforce this are going to be made by the police chief, the drug chief doesn't envision him making rules. So they'll go on. I just don't have a timeline of when they're going to come up, but they'll be thing. I don't believe that they're going to go to the planning commission before they. I think they're going to stay within the council docket thing, and the council will probably schedule a public hearing on one or more.
Any questions?
Was the council involved at all in the post office decision to change their 24-hour lobby access to lesser hours? I know it's not a city building, but I didn't know if they reached out to see.
No, we weren't involved in that at all, and I don't even have a frame of references to their why.
Well, I don't know why. My usual access in place is after 6 o'clock, and it was getting to be take the football team with you so you could get through the crowd. It was lobbying for the two outlets that they could put their cell phones on charge overnight with, and the sleeping behind the boxes that couldn't be seen from outside the window. And occasionally it was discomforting to see all the eyes looking at you while you tried to get to one of the further in boxes. So I know why they changed it. Unfortunately, they followed up by not leaving it open at all on Sunday, a couple of Sundays. So now it's like call for a reservation. I don't know, but I didn't know if the city was queried at all about, did they have any concerns about that?
I don't know. It wasn't anything that came to the council attention, whether in the bowels of the city there was someone that talked to. I don't know.
Sure. Well, that whole area, because it's private property, that the leases to the stores and the store owners are all dealing with a ever-changing slurry of deteriorating situations. So, but I am disappointed that if you're going to close out all the time on Saturday and Sunday, then just close it. Don't put a sign up there and say the lobby is no longer 24 hours. Now it's 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. It's closed. Well, it's closed all Sunday, a couple of Sundays back, and it's disappointing because it really devalues. I don't care to get into those potential conflicts going into the post office, and if I can't go in, except when it's the daytime crowd, then I need to do something else. They're killing the opportunity, which is happening a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chief Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Some significant calls we've had in the last couple of months. Not so much fires. We've had a couple of small ones but one that's come up is we've had a couple of significant events where a number of mobile homes and apartments have lost some power due to like power issues. Some of it kind of landlord related, some of it's more electrical vaults, working with the power company to restore some of that. Some of the challenges there is because it's cold, it's wintertime. And so a number of families sometimes are without power. Most of them find some kind of resource to stay, keep their family warm. Some of the families that we work with to try and find resources, because if the home is still habitable, losing power is not one of those things the Red Cross is like, oh, we have a lot of resources. It's not something for DEM or even the coalition that we have to try to set up a place for people to stay. It's just not something that happens. So we have our nonprofit West Pierce Cares that is helping families, and it's mostly young kids, babies that need food, warm milk, or older folks. The city does have a program, but not everybody qualifies for that program. And they have to show up in person, and so sometimes that's a difficulty. And these events, they happen after hours or on a weekend. So, but we have been able to find resources at the end of the day to get most of these folks to a safe place to be. You might have read about some of the king tides that we had, more related to University Place, Lakewood. I don't believe we had any issues with people flooding high tides, nothing like that. We also, something that we're monitoring very closely is an ambulance company, AMR, is going to be pulling out of Pierce County. And so that's a concern for us because of the contracts that they have for some of the interfacility transports that they have. It is our understanding that they're not going to be doing that work anymore. And that was as of like yesterday. We believe there's a couple companies that are trying to pick up that work, but we don't have very good indication that they're going to do that right away. So that's probably put a little bit of an extra strain maybe on 911 calls, and certainly calls for service for our medical units. So it's something that we'll keep an eye on, but probably more to come. A couple other things, our smoke alarm program is still going, so if people do need smoke alarms, we certainly are reaching out to the community as we can. There's been a few changes as far as the types of smoke alarms that have been made available. They have ones now that are supposed to not have issues like if you're cooking and you burn some toast, you know, oh gosh, smoke alarms going on. Well, they have some new technology out there, so if you're curious about it, our fire investigators can help with that process, and we even have ones that we can install for free. CPR classes will be starting back up in March. It's been a few years since we've been able to offer that program, but that will be up and available on our website. And dock numbering systems, we've had a few people ask about that numbering system. We have a numbering system that we've created. It's been in place. The piece that has been slightly challenging for some folks is how to obtain those placards to put on their docks if they fall off, or if they build a new dock. What's that process to do that? There's a small cost. It's not something that the fire department provides, but we do have a couple of vendors that can provide those placards. Obviously, they're needed, you know, if you're out on the lakes or anything like that, and somebody goes over and you see a dock number, and you can report that during the 911 call. So we had an interview process for an emergency management coordinator. We do have a conditional offer, so hopefully very soon we'll be able to announce who that is. So we're excited about that. Our annual report will be available in the next few weeks. One piece that in some of the meetings that I've been in is just you hear about all this growth with the city, and so our inspectors They inspected 1,800 systems and inspections this past year, which is up over 50%, which is pretty amazing how that work just gets done. And we're also excited February 11th, Caring for Kids is having an event, an auction, and we're going to be able to auction on some safety presentations that's coupled with an ice cream party for kids in the elementary schools.
Who is next hour on weekends?
Well, it's not always by choice.
I was wondering, because we have a policy we would
right, and I know even one that's separate that I didn't talk about is that I think there's a family that had some sensitive medical issues or some medical equipment, and they're supposed to provide some paperwork, and some of that paperwork wasn't in place for this family. So anyway, it's been resolved, but yeah, that was one reason why their power got shut off. That's good to know, and we always encourage families if they do calls that they have to report this.
So they need to communicate. That's our number one concern is people don't communicate, and we can't get hold of them, so we don't even know if people are living there. So they try to pick a sunny day, don't they?
No, it's never at noon on a Monday. It's 6 p.m. on a Friday. So.
Any questions? Well, thank you, Assistant Chief Adams.
Thank you.
And Assistant Chief Humphrey.
Good evening. Yes, I am back. I'm 6-month fellowship at FBI headquarters, so I'm officially back on duty. Update on, so a couple things with the chief. Hopefully you've gotten word from Joanna. So Monday, this coming Monday, the 6th, an hour before the normal council meeting. So council was 7. So at 6 p.m. will be a reception in council chambers for Chief Zarro for his retirement. And then at 7, at the beginning of the council meeting, they'll be doing a proclamation in honor of his career here. So we'd love to see all of you. I know Mike will for that. And then the chief process still dragging on. They tell me, sometime by the end of this week or maybe early mid next week. So I think this is finally coming down to a head on that. And I don't have any idea which way it's going to go. One quick thing we participated in, some of you saw the march from the historical stone for Chief Letchai by the Nisqually tribe down to Fort Stoughton Park. Kind of came to light, the history that Chief Letchai was falsely accused of murder and starting a preface with the truth way back in the 1800s. He was hung not far right where Stoughton Boulevard and Lake Stoughton and meet sort of in that area. There's a stone in the Thunderbird Parkway that was put there in the 60s by the Pierce County Historical Society. That got hit by an unknown driver, kind of made the news. The city tried to fix it with a couple of attempts, but finally got it fixed. And then the Nisqually tribe wanted to use that as a learning moment for everybody. So they did a march. We supported that with traffic control, myself and the patrol lieutenant walking in, the fire chief, and it's very well attended. I think they're expecting about 100 people. They got 400 people. And so it was great because they talked about his history there, and then we walked down to Fort Stoughton Park. They had food, music, and talked about their history and their culture in this area and stuff. So it was very, very successful. On the body cams and in-car video, so body cams have been out. They're fully deployed now. I've got to get my training and get my initiative to me, but that seems to be working well. And then the in-car video is the next piece. we had to cease operation. We had continued the Coban, that was our previous manufacturer. We continued that as an in-car and then switched to the Axon with the body cam. So we had two systems that don't talk to each other, but we continued that until we can get the Axon in-car video itself and supply chain issues and everything else. So, however, then the Coban started having more and more problems. So we had to shut down. The Coban. So we don't have in-car video. We do have body cam. And then March 21st, Axon will be here to start doing the installs on the in-car video. And then that's a 3-week process. So all of our marked and all of our uniform cars, so patrol and traffic and NPOs will all have in-car video. Everyone, every officer from the chief on down has a body cam available to them. But so anyways, early April will be fully deployed with Axon. And then this summer, Axon will be here to do all of the interview rooms, the BAC room, and the phlebotomy room. And so all of those systems will be integrated into the cloud storage and all of that. So, so far, I'm just getting back. So I'm getting used to looking at from the back end, being able to look at videos. So for instance, if there's a use of force or pursuit, we look at those administratively to determine if they're within policy or not. So in the past, I would have maybe some photographs attached to this electronic system that we use. And so I look at the police report and the pictures, and now I can just click a few links and get the body cam footage. Eventually I'll get the in-car video. And maybe it's one of the next ones we can do demonstration, but it does a transcript on one side, and then it has GPS. So for instance, in a pursuit, it will show the GPS trail, and I can click anywhere along that trail, and it'll take me to the video that right there. So I don't have to search for it. I can say, oh, when the officer turned at 100th and Lakeview, I can just find 100 Lakeview on the map, click it, and it will fast forward the video right to that point. Or you go through the transcript and find keywords, click on it, and it'll take you right to that point in the video. It's very, very powerful. And then Axon does a lot with the redaction and that kind of stuff.
So it also have audio?
Yes, yeah. So the body cam will do the audio for the in-car video once they're married up. So we're moving along. The policy is done and signed off by the guilds. Lieutenant Allwine, acting assistant chief Allwine, to finish that up while I was gone. So everything is set. We're just waiting for the in-car video. And other than that, that's about it for us. Any questions?
A few weeks ago, I talked with Chief Sorrell about the NPO program.
Right.
He was trying to get it going again, and he said he thought they would have one NPO assigned to business. Has that been set up yet? Or
To just businesses? Mm-hmm. I haven't heard that.
Well, I guess not.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we just put, we have a new NPO for the RBL, for the mental health contact team. And then we just moved 2 back in because we've gotten all the new officers into patrol. And so there's still a few that are in training that we're starting to push back into the specialized units. So we've got 3 NPOs out there now. But I had not heard about this, so I'll have to ask about that one.
Second question is, you're going to need a reference for getting that Walmart user job?
I'll tell them that you're willing and able to help them out there.
Well, yeah. I can make something up.
Right.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. I still don't have any youth council.
Okay. Sorry, was that a question? I apologize if I'm on mute button.
Oh, no youth council, correct?
No, I will reach out and find out what happened. We've been assigned 4, and I have included all 4 of them in every email, so I'm not really clear, but I will see what I can do.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, the neighborhood association roadmap. Anybody have any? Councilman, can you, again, this is to have been a couple of months, kind of again expand on what the council was looking. I know it was to try to get the neighborhood association revitalized again and just coming up with some ideas.
Yeah, the council is well aware that neighborhood associations and go back to many years that they were created using police district boundaries, specifically to deal with a particular grant program taking place in the early 2000s. That recently we've been down to where there were only 2 neighborhood associations that were actually actively meeting. And some of them have stayed themselves out before COVID, and then COVID restricted some of the others. And there was some question as to whether the boundaries of the council was making associations so big in that were a part of the barrier to getting some effective neighborhood associations going. So that the council is looking to try to get that re-energized, with not necessarily being the same physical areas to do that. But there's not a lot of I think there's some interest in the community, but there's not a lot of understanding about how to go about creating one to be able to go and do that. The North Lakewood Council really invented itself and kind of went through a process but what I know that right now is the one the city council budgeted for a person to be on the city staff who has not yet been hired, but is going to be a community coordinator, liaison resource, which will include working with neighborhood associations and other things, and they're helping to do that for someone to have that task. And then I'm aware that actually the Telecom Woodbrook Neighborhood Association has not been meeting during the entire COVID development. They're going to start meeting again this month. Their first meeting is going to be this coming Monday. That the Lake City group is still meeting, and the North Lake is still scheduled time for their day one. So we're expecting this to be a year where some of those are re-energized, or maybe a couple of new ones are created, and with boundaries that people even think of as their neighborhood, as opposed to the big areas that were high in police.
Comments, thoughts, ideas?
When we get that person hired, that would be a person to comment for very
good. Agreed. New business preview of the next meeting, April 5th. I'm not sure what to have on that.
Some of the agenda, it's on the work plan.
Oh, work plan. Yeah. So it's with the Neighborhood Association Revitalization Roadmap. And then the next meeting, We should have a new police chief, and we might want to address what we were looking at for the business public safety survey, giving the new chief an opportunity to kind of his thoughts and his plan. And and community outreach, neighborhood association.
Well, we read it. The June meeting has the topic of Summerfest. I don't know what date in July the Summerfest will be. I can't find it on any city publications, but it'll be in July if they have it. I want to introduce the concept that last 2 years we voted for that, and there was negative volunteerism to support it. And I'll bring it personal. I spent a lot of time last year surveying the availability of machines, arranging for access, stopping my calendar, and we ended up with, I guess, ghost hands that voted for it, but couldn't make a plan on their calendar to support it. I have less availability this year, plus I'm not interested in having this solo adventure that ends up being canceled. I laid the money out. I had to deal with these folks 3 or 4 times. I've done it. You know, I've been on PSAC except for 4 years, most of the last 15 years. The last 2 years, it's kind of shocking. It wasn't just here. You know, they were looking for volunteers that like to get wet and all that isn't. But I think we ought to force a little more insight about whether it can really be done and just erase it if there isn't a commitment. Just look at your calendars and say, sometime the last week or 2 of July, this will be going on, and take about 4 hours of your life and say, it's not going to be picnics, it's not going to be taking kids around. If you get sick, fine, or a death in the family, but it's absurd to have all that work go into a non-event. So I think we got to talk about that now. The next meeting is going to be on top of it almost.
Right.
Reservations, you can't make those reservations in a 4 or 5 week advance period. Confidently, you might get away with it.
So is that something we want to continue?
I want to just add or input to that for years and years I've helped with them too, and served. Last year I think we were out of town or whatever, but I do think there is at least some sense that the amount of work that goes into doing that doesn't really pay off as much, because it feels like, I don't know, what we raised for the foundation and the amount of work and effort didn't seem to really. So I, for one, don't really want to put any more effort into something that seems to be not really paying off. Especially when it's like it'd be great if we could come up with another idea.
Yeah, another alternative. Something that wouldn't take as much.
But it's all doable stuff, but when you take all the doable pile up, it's a bit of a, you know, the fire department, we negotiate how to get the tankers up there, and you can find our spot. Somebody has to go and stake that out early before the nomads take over the area, and you have to pick one where the water and drains goes away from important stuff. So it's not just get up and somebody haul the pickup with a hitch on it in there. It's a bunch of little stuff, but it's all little stuff that can be done. But then when nobody's at the table or going to help you fetch the ball, I gave them a green fix for a couple of years. And I don't mind bringing the block, but I could have called it the Oxen cherry.
Yeah, Todd.
Yeah, I would add here from other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce and others, we're constantly looking at efforts, events, and special events like these that have a small payoff based on the amount of work that goes in, and some are the opposite. Very little work goes into some nice payoff. Something I think we miss without that event is the interface, maybe for the kids to see. In this case, the fire department, public first responders out there, and maybe there's something that isn't so much work or costly that would be a great interface still to bring the public safety side to a place where kids can interface. I mean, I think photo opportunities would almost get them as excited as anything, but thinking in terms of something like that gets them involved. I mean, the fire helmets that they give away have a line every time. So the kids want this interface. And maybe the fact that the tank costs something reduces the amount of interfacing we get so that the kids' exposure to public safety first responders is reduced. I'm not presenting a solution as usual. I'm just stating I think there might be a great way to get the kids involved, to get the families involved in first responders without that amount of effort.
So there's already the first responders are already out there with the rigs and all that, and police officer cars and things like that. So there is a pretty significant presence, but maybe there's a way to kind of boost it and maybe, I don't know, make it even more attractive.
They do love that. If there's one thing I can say, my kids and cousins had a birthday party at a park, and the fire department had responded to something a block away, and they saw the kids out there, and they stopped and let them hold the hose and just spray it 30, 40 feet across the grass, messed around with the kids and left again. This is 5-6 years ago, and it is a kid's lasting memory. And maybe there'd be something like that, fire hose and targets or something, that virtually no cost, that would get the kids experience one-on-one with these folks. They love the trucks. They do climb all over the trucks. But if they could touch something, that might be awesome. I know out at military on base days, armed forces days, they let the kids hold shoulder-mounted grenade launchers and things like that, and the kids go nuts for it. They stand in line just to touch that stuff.
Now they want drones.
Yeah, something that might be easy, engaging. I think fire department, police department, tug of war. Grab the kids on your team.
And I think if you want to look at the timeline, that maybe restricting yourself, looking to do something in Summerfest, that maybe if you decided that you wanted to try to do something with folks who sit on fucking tractor day, which is very primarily a kids type event, whereas Summerfest has a whole lot of different audiences, many of whom are not the ones who would expect to be. It might be easier to do something in October.
Don't tank in October, that'd be good.
It's cold enough in July, I think.
Well, I know everything I now date is pre-pandemic, the new religious marker. Pre-pandemic, there was a couple that I told the tank for that Brett got on the chair a couple times during the morning, and Aline Bassan, some of those folks were not known to the population, but when the other troops saw the bosses getting up there, and we had lines. I mean, we had 20, 25 people lines. So it actually made money for the charity. And I think it resulted in that interaction, which led to some real, rapport with the law enforcement. Some of the firefighters chose to take challenges from the police, and they got on there more. It's kind of like having the police and fire basketball game. They started, so the synergy to pull that together so well was powerful. Both, and it got a decent sum of money, and all kinds of young people just got to kick it. They like throwing that ball, see if they can splash a cop or a fireman. So, but we had lines, and Paul Pastoral went by one year, and he was taunted by a couple of police, and Paul pulled his shirt off and his shoes, and he climbed up in there. So you get that kind of synergy going, and it thrives on itself. And we may never get that again. And the idea of finding another alternative is probably a good one, since we haven't really thought about that for a while. If at least the co-priority was to get some money to get back to the charity, the tug of war thing, I don't know if you can charge spectators to watch it or participants, but if indeed that's going to be coupled with that, it'll be a little harder option to get.
Well, we can table it. Maybe, like you said, we've got our.
I'd like to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. The one year that I did run the Summerfest, I did it, got some help from Mark and a couple other guys. Ray, I don't think you were there.
I wasn't.
We donated money to make sure we got the tank, we got all that stuff there. It wasn't much of a hassle to get it done and figure out how to do it. The participation was lacking. We had quite a few people come through, but we didn't make much. I think Joanne remembers we made a little about $250, $300, and so that's where it is. It's just getting out and advertising or finding some way to get people to come in there. But it wasn't much of a hassle for me. Like I said, I did most of the work that year. I got the tank, kept it in my driveway, turned it back in one day. So we only spent 1 day's worth of funds to get it done, and that was that. So I'll leave it at that. But I'm willing to help with whatever we want to do. But we do need to have some committee participation if we're going to do it.
What are the thoughts on Truck and Tractor Day a little bit later in the year versus trying to compete with Summerfest and the timeline that we're looking at? Give us a little bit more opportunity to come up with some thoughts, ideas.
If we got something that work, we'd probably make more money at Summerfest. But if it's maybe to try it out, we could do it. Tractor days, see how it works, and then make that decision. I mean, we're dealing with 25,000 people at Summerfest.
But it still takes a crew to put it on.
We could come up with something that could be managed by 2 or 3 people or something that's basically what managed the dump tank. The problem with the dump tank is that the people who wanted the dump tank were busy and occupied and doing other things, and and it was, so it's hard to get that scheduled. So if we eliminate that part of it, but maybe have some kind of skills things where you give a kid a squirt gun and he goes and tries to fill something up, well, tips over and he runs down and does something else, and you time him till he gets back and charge him $2 to do it. We ought to be able to come up with something. If I may sort of bring us back to the center of what Ray was really asking, I think, is are we going to do dump tank and Summerfest, and whether or not we have an alternative? Is that really a question? Are we going to do it or not? And it sounds like the dump tank isn't, nobody's real excited about that.
No, the police officers were decided on. We got very few volunteers. So
that we can work on, we can fill out. That it seemed to fall apart. we were feeding them off in droves, but I can get the people there.
Just seemed like there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm last year.
Yeah, we always have to do a little bit of recruiting, and our person was some of
the doing something different, I think, would be good. We did the dump tank for a number of years, so change would be good.
One of the things that had worked pre-pandemic, the Relay for Life, Paul Pastor was able to get a motorcycle guy, a SWAT car, and this little 5-sided fold-up thing that was in make-believe jail, and people were put in jail, you ransomed them out. And they got him a Relay for Life. He was crowded all the time because he got a couple of volunteers to take pictures, and they were just churning through. The kids wanted pictures, and the parents were having to kick out who was in the jail and be ransomed out. And it was, he brought that law enforcement cluster in there for that. There's so many, in my opinion, fire and police working at Summerfest, doing the fitting of the life jackets and the helmets and giving out displays and brochures and stuff. And they're, as far as I remember, most of them are offering patrol cars are nearby and the equipment is there. So the interaction with police and fire is pretty vigorous on that day on Summerfest. They're both putting a lot of manpower in there to do that. So in a way, it's kind of competing with itself. But Summerfest is big numbers achieved. I've not been to truck and tractor, so I don't know about that.
So what are our thoughts? So hold off on dump tank for this year. Try something different. Maybe a little less labor intensive.
Were you looking for a motion?
Sure.
I move we dispense with the dump tank for Summerfest this year, but we try to maybe come up with another method of replacement.
Second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
So can we send any ideas we have to Martin? Let him collect a bunch of ideas.
Yep, and then I'll collect the ideas and then send them out to the committee for future consideration or some more thoughts.
You can put it on the April agenda.
To put it on the April agenda, we're going to relook at Summerfest activity.
Yep.
And I didn't acknowledge something Paul did not acknowledge. Joanna did a lot of work behind the scenes, trying to keep touch with with us and with the police and coordinating, trying to keep rosters going. So the silent hard worker in the background there, she was doing a lot of work all the way through that period.
Are we in the neighborhood reports or we're back?
Yeah, that's where we're going next.
Okay. North Lakewood Neighborhood Association met January 24th and it was a do or die meeting because both the president and vice president had announced they wouldn't run and nobody had stepped forward, but they had a meeting and Todd Freeman has stepped up and he's going to be president and Patrick's going to help him get going. So the North neighborhood is going to continue on.
Very good. Brook Connection has been having regular meetings, monthly meetings. They're still pretty active, pretty much oriented for food drive with their area. I've been a few that. There's been a little bit of discussion about community garden. Just a regular community garden this year.
Any other comments from the committee? Motion to adjourn.
And move we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Everybody?
Hey, can you tell me who made the motion and who seconded it?
No, we're keeping the secret.
Yeah.
Mark made the motion and Alan seconded.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did everybody get a copy of the contact list? Got my email on there.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.